Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is the story about Naruto, What If Naruto Married with Ino Yamanaka, Part 17. Hope you'll enjoy this video. So before we start, please do support for more awesome content and also hit the subscribe button and share this video with your friends. And also support the creator of this fanfic. I have created a playlist where you can find out all the previous parts of this video, link in the description, and check out the other video as well. So let's start the video. There were certain unavoidable facts that everyone had to accept. For Uzumaki Naruto, it was the fact that he needed to re-enter the village proper and buy a new jacket. His old one was shredded. Patched, but shredded. Also, he was hungry and, really, his training was now, by all accounts, to the point that he could do it as he went about his business. Hence, his total concentration on the balloon in his hand as he strolled down the street, unaware of the attention he was gaining. Not that it would have mattered to him. Naruto was used to attention. Of course, that was the attention of a troublemaker or an enemy plant. The attention he was currently receiving was just a step beneath hero worship. Thankfully, Naruto was, indeed, oblivious to this for the moment, at least. He was doing pretty well, or at least he felt like he was. So far, he had managed to keep this balloon from popping. He didn't even want to think about how many others he'd wasted since Iro-sennin had left yesterday. Plus, he had learned something pretty impressive. Once he got the bubble of chakra formed around the swirling chaos, he could maintain it with one hand for a few seconds, at least. This was proven a moment later, as he finally removed his hand and attempted to keep it working with one hand. It lasted for a full 10 seconds before it went pop, fluttering his clothes and rocking a few hanging signs. Sighing, he pocketed the broken balloon and produced a new one, resuming his training before a hand landed on his shoulder. Jerking, Naruto turned, ready to fight. Instead, he was brought up short by Kakashi, who had his infamous red book in hand and opened it. "Just the ninja I wanted to see," Kakashi said, his eyes curving upward happily. "Why?" "Well, first, to congratulate you on becoming a Chunin." "Wait, what?" Naruto interrupted, eyes wide and the balloon in his hands trembling as he lost focus. "Didn't anyone tell you?" Kakashi asked as his eyes drooped. "You were promoted to Chunin. There weren't very many of you this time, Arrow." "I'm a Chunin?" Naruto shouted, his balloon exploding forcefully. The blonde ignored that and was now jumping around, screaming, and causing all sorts of havoc in the street. He couldn't believe it. He had made it. He was a Chunin now, and that meant he was officially one step closer to being Hokage. Halfway through his celebration and plans for gorging on ramen, he realized that nobody had bothered telling him about this before now. Stopping, he looked at the white-haired man, frowning with narrowed eyes. "Hoi, how long have I been a Chunin?" A while now," Kakashi admitted, looking up from his little red book. "Is something wrong?" Naruto, however, shook his head, keeping his face neutral. Internally, however, he was ranting and raving and, most importantly, plotting his payback. Someone should have told him. He could overlook Kakashi and Jiraiya merely because they had things to do with keeping the village functioning, but Ino and Shino? Oh, they were so going to get it, and Anko was definitely going to regret not telling him. "Well, anyway," Kakashi continued, his eyes curving upward once more. "Congratulations on the promotion. As for the other reason I wanted to see you, I learned from Anko that your apartment was the one destroyed in the battle with Gaara." "Yeah," Naruto said with a scowl, turning his mind toward that problem. "All my stuff and everything. Well, Anko managed to get a few things out and I arranged to have them put something interesting." Kakashi paused, putting his book up. "It's sort of a reward for saving the village." "Really?" Naruto managed, eyes lighting up. He was getting a reward for saving the village? Probably some new apartment, which would be great. "Yep, just follow me," Kakashi said before taking off at a casual pace. Naruto quickly followed, mind churning, as he searched his pockets before blowing up yet another balloon. That done, he began concentrating yet again, picking up the pace, as Kakashi did. Several minutes later, Naruto was beginning to appreciate just how big Konoha actually was. They had passed through the more upscale areas, then through the marketplace, before finally entering a section that seemed to be nothing but forest. Then, finally, they exited that and came to a section of the village that was pleasant. No sign of ninja. No sign of any hostility, actually. Each home was a two-story deal, a blend between traditional and modern. Same basic layout, from what Naruto could tell, the picture-perfect neighborhood. Hell, the people were going about their daily lives with smiles on their faces, not even caring that there were two ninjas strolling down the street. Not many ninja come through here, Kakashi explained. This used to be Anbu housing, where families of Anbu members lived. Eventually, we moved them out and regular villagers moved in. They have their own community and very rarely venture into the main areas of Konoha. Boy, it seems different here, Naruto said, looking around, surprised to find a group of girls his age watching his progress with the sort of interest he normally associated with Sasuke fangirls. Well, of course it does, Kakashi said. These are all civilians, Naruto. They don't know much of anything that goes on in the rest of Konoha, and they're not overly interested in hearing about it. They want nice simple lives which most ninja find utterly boring. Oh, Naruto said, glancing to his left, where he found a small child playing with a dog. So, is there somewhere I can stay? Yeah, it used to be a kind of lookout station against Iwa back during the last ninja war. It was abandoned a little after that war ended. Outdated, really. It's where I had your stuff put, the only available location. Without further ado, they came to a stop just on the outside of the neighborhood they had been traveling through, which meant they were facing the side of the smaller mountain and were surrounded by several trees. Turning back, Naruto could still make out with the villagers as they went about their lives. Okay, Naruto said, looking around carefully. I don't see any place where I can stay. Kakashi, however, merely pointed his finger skyward. Naruto blinked, then craned his neck to see what the masked man had to show him, and he nearly toppled over. Maybe 20 feet overhead was a round, two-story building, topped with a conical roof. It was suspended in the air by four slanted beams that ran from the mountain to the underside of the building. Wah, Naruto managed, taking a step back to try and get a better view of the building. The entire top floor was designed to serve as a training area. The bottom floor is mostly living space, plenty of room. Okay, Naruto said slowly as he glanced at the masked man. And you're just going to let me live here? Yes, Kakashi said simply. Why? Because you sorta own it, Kakashi chuckled. Sensei, the Yondaime, bought it shortly after the war and did some renovations to make it livable. He liked the peace living here among the villagers gave him. It was his fortress of solitude, I guess. And I own it? Naruto repeated blankly, knowing that he was missing something obvious. You didn't just give away houses, especially not this type of place. Well, I figure you are better than someone else. Besides, I never come out here, Kakashi said, handing over the keys and the deed. Just be careful. The Sandaime didn't remove some things for security reasons. There's no telling what you'll find in there. Naruto nodded, then looked up at the building, overwhelmed with the knowledge of owning it. Not only a building, but his own family's house. He had inherited something, which was just freaky for an orphan. And then, Naruto's mind stumbled across a rather disturbing problem. Boy, how the hell do I get up there? Shunshin. Listening to the ticking clock, Ino sighed and glanced at her mom, who was busy fussing over the flowers. For a while, right after the Chunin exams, things had been busy, but now it was painfully boring. Rolling her eyes, utterly bored, Ino turned back to her notebook and the notes it contained. Studying her handwriting, along with Sakura's notes, Ino mused over the explanation for the Shuoshuku Kate silently. Since her Shintention had improved, thanks to her father finally walking her through the finer points, she didn't feel guilty about looking at the Genjutsu. Secretly, Ino even felt that she was close to being able to perform the Shinranshin, but she wasn't going to push it too much. Scratching the back of her hand, Ino nodded to herself. The concept was easy enough. Maybe she should try it? Remembering her father's warning about not using it until she had more practice with the others, Ino decided trying it in the family shop would not be a good idea. Besides, she wanted to let her arm heal completely so she could work it into her training routine along with Kenjutsu. Her fingers twitched just thinking about the Kadachi that had been delivered to her a few days ago. The old man, Kawakami Musashi, had told her that Hayate had special ordered it for her. Tsukiha, Ino murmured fondly, seeing the crane handguard and the reversed handle as clearly as ever. Added to her anxiousness to resume her training were the scrolls that Yugao had dropped off a day after she had received her sword. Ino had read the first one and knew that the others contained further knowledge of his Kenjutsu, a Kenjutsu that he now left in her hands. Hayate had given her so much, helped her find her own path, and there was a dull throb as she realized he was gone. Startled out of her thoughts about the blade and her former sensei by the sound of a jingling bell, she grumbled. Looking up, ready to greet the new customer, she froze, discovering one Uzumaki Naruto standing in the doorway. He was looking around curiously, a balloon in his hand, a grin on his face, and wearing a tattered jacket. It struck Ino, as odd as that, after not seeing him for nearly a month, he should just wander into her flower shop. "Oi, Ino-chan," Naruto said, starting toward her, his grin growing. "Huh? Ino, you know him?" her mom asked, pausing and watering the flowers to watch the boy curiously. "Yeah," Ino said, blinking. "Naruto-kun, where have you been? The whole village has been crazy trying to find you and stuff, plus you just left without telling us anything. Anko-sensei wouldn't even tell us either. Just had us training every morning." "Boy, I was training, too," Naruto said happily, holding his balloon up. "See?" Ino stared at the balloon blankly, but decided to take his word for it. "Wait, so this is the Naruto I've heard about?" her mother asked brightly, and Ino saw the look in her eyes. "Well, since he turned up, I'm sure he won't mind helping Inoichi out in the back." "Huh?" Naruto blinked, obviously trying to figure out how that worked. "Just go on back, dear," her mom said, shoving the blonde from behind so that he stumbled past the counter and into the hallway connecting to the back room. "Mom," Ino hissed, glaring at the now bemused woman who was tapping her finger against her cheek. "What are you doing?" "Nothing," her mom said defensively, despite a knowing glint in her eye. "You are bored here, right? Maybe you'd like to go out for lunch?" "Moom," Ino pleaded, almost afraid of what the woman was thinking. "He's just my friend. I never said he wasn't." "But you're trying to get him and me to go out together for lunch," Ino huffed, stomping his feet. "I am doing no such thing," her mom said, grinning, as the sounds of shattering glass and curses drifted from the back room. "I just asked if you'd like some lunch. Just go." Inoichi's voice suddenly shouted, amid more noise of destruction. "Oh, but I came to see Ino-chan." "Take her with you then. Just get out." Inoichi shouted back, a second before Naruto re-emerged without a balloon and looked disgruntled. "Oh dear," her mom said, hand on her cheek. "Perhaps you two should leave, maybe get some lunch?" When Inoichi gets like this. "Mom," Ino said accusingly, but the older woman merely smiled sweetly. Naruto, utterly clueless to what had transpired, was quickly ushered out the door by a furious Ino. She knew it would be pointless to argue with her mom right then, but this was so not the last of it. Shooting one last, dark glare at her cheerful mom, Ino stepped outside to join Naruto. Self-consciously adjusting the sling her arm was resting in, Ino sighed. Her mom could be such a pain, sometimes. Honestly, she and Naruto were just friends, teammates. Still, lunch would be nice, and she hadn't seen him for a while. Maybe going out for lunch wasn't such a bad idea. "So, where should we go to eat?" "Ichiraku," Naruto shouted eagerly, eyes alight. "Again?" Ino said, staring at him startled. "Don't you ever eat anything else?" "Huh? Why?" Naruto asked, setting off at a brisk pace. "Ramen is the perfect food. Hoi, and it has all these toppings. Fried rice, Chinese dumplings, seaweed, kamaboko, green onions, and even corn. Plus miso and pork, which is one of my favorites." Ino felt herself blush slightly at that, though she couldn't think of a reason why. Shaking it off, she grabbed his arm and jerked him to a stop. "How about I pick today, okay? I know this place where they serve tea and good salads." "Yuck," Naruto said, scrunching his face up. "They're not that bad," Ino said with a roll of her eyes. "Besides, it'd be good for you to eat something else. Remember, absence makes the heart grow fonder." "But I don't need to get any fonder of it," Naruto said sulkily. "Besides, ramen never hurt me. Have you ever stopped to think that maybe the reason you're a midget is cause you never eat anything but ramen?" Ino snapped back irritably, then almost winced, realizing what she had said. "Oi, and maybe the reason you don't have tits is cause all you ever eat is vegetables?" Naruto snapped back, glaring at her. Ino rounded on him, surprised that he was able to match her glare for glare. Any further argument was cut short by a loud and horribly familiar voice. "Naruto." "Ino." Turning, Ino winced as Kiba and Akamaru trotted up, along with Yaban, the village's biggest gossip. "Kami, this was not good. That girl would blow this whole situation way out of proportion." "Oi, Kiba," Naruto said brightly, apparently clueless as to who the girl was. "You two out on a date?" "Haha, what can I say? It's animal magnetism." Kiba chuckled, dodging a swipe from the girl beside him. I'll have you know, I asked him to help me find my little sister. Yaban said, glancing between them. Speaking of dates. Which this isn't. Ino interjected firmly. We're on the same team. It's not strange for us to hang out together. So, is Naruto still available? Yaban asked, giving him an appraisal once over. Would you like to go get something to eat? Huh? Naruto managed, blinking. Well, I was sorta going. Naruto-kun, why don't you go on ahead? That place I was talking about is just down the street, Ino interrupted hastily, knowing the glint in the other girl's eyes. Naruto, royally confused, shrugged, and turned off on his own. What was that about? Kiba asked, almost as confused as the blonde young man. Listen, Kiba, why don't you keep looking around? Yaban said sweetly. Just go, Ino snapped, not looking away from the other girl. Okay, Kiba said, going off on his own, muttering about crazy girls. So, Yaban said slyly. Back off, Ino said curtly. You really don't want to get involved. All of you fangirls make me sick. When he wasn't known for saving the village, none of you wanted anything to do with him, and now. Oh, look who's talking. Yaban said heatedly. You used to fawn all over Sasuke, remember? I'm sure your new boyfriend there is really naive enough to think you've actually changed. Ino paused, feeling as if she had been slapped, then narrowed her eyes. First, he's not my boyfriend. Second, when I fawned all over Sasuke, I was a stupid little bitch. Unlike you and all these other girls that apparently never got the damn memo to grow up. That said, Ino rounded on her heel and stormed off. That had felt pretty damn good, that was for sure. Picking up the pace, she spotted a confused Naruto who was surrounded by several giggling girls. Ugh. Ino managed, grinding her teeth as she stormed up and pulled the boy away. Was it too much to ask for a few minutes alone with Naruto? Shaking her head in annoyance, she led the still confused Naruto into the Konoha Tea Avenue. Boy, I didn't know you could see the Hokage mountain from here, Naruto said brightly, gazing up at the faces. Awesome. Yeah, it's a great view, Ino muttered, dragging the boy into the nearest tea cafe. The place was a bit crowded, but Ino managed to snag them a table. Keeping in mind Naruto and his fixation on the Hokages, she made sure to pick one that they could see the Hokage mountain from. So, Naruto said, glancing around, then at her. Do I have to order vegetables? What is your problem with them? Ino asked in exasperation. They're evil, Naruto said heatedly, crossing his arms. Didn't you see the news report where those giant tomatoes went on a rampage and started eating people? Ino blinked, then hurriedly flagged down a waitress. Jasmine tea. And for you? The woman asked, glancing at Naruto, then doing a double take when she realized who she was talking to. You know, green tea, I guess. Right, of course, the waitress managed before hurrying off. Boy, so anyway, do I really gotta? Yes, Ino said in exasperation. You do. Now, get over it and look at your menu. Seeing his pout, Ino rolled her eyes and resisted the urge to slap him upside the head. It wouldn't look good, she told herself. Slapping a village hero over his problem with vegetables would not be smart. Besides, at least he was willing to eat something other than ramen for her. That had been nothing short of a miracle, and she knew it. Taking the tea from a nervous waitress a moment later, Ino resigned herself to dealing with that reaction from now on when hanging out with Naruto. So, what would you like for lunch? The waitress stammered. Salad, no dressing, Ino ordered, glancing at Naruto curiously. The blonde was scowling as he skimmed the menu before snapping his fingers and grinning. How about a large vegetarian noodle soup? Naruto said, glancing up at the waitress with a grin. With an extra order of noodles? Of course, the woman said, hurrying off once more. Ino sighed, then rubbed her temples. Well, at least it wasn't ramen. Starting out from the small room adjoining Fugaku's private office over the small garden, which was enclosed by the home's inner wall, Uchiha Mikoto silently waited for the girl to settle in. Hearing the girl finally finish, the Uchiha matriarch turned her attention to the girl, smiling gently to ease her nerves. Uchiha Mikomi was from a distant branch of the family, considered almost a black sheep, as Uchiha women went. At 14 she was both pretty and very temperamental, demanding to be treated equal to the male Uchiha members. Mikoto smiled to herself, the girl was a very good choice for the plan the elders had created. The girl was, of course, a Chunin, which meant she was strong. She had also managed to attain a 2-Tomo Sharingan, which was very rare for the females of the clan. With her temperament, which from Makoto's observations seemed the type to attract Naruto, she would be perfect. Mikomi-chan? Thank you, yes, thank you, Makoto-sama. The younger girl said with a slight bow, obviously pleased and honored to be meeting with her. Makoto nodded slightly, gesturing for the maid to pour the drinks, and then dismissed her casually. Gesturing gracefully at the steaming cup of tea, Makoto selected her own. Both women drank silently, Mikomi obviously caught up in the mystery of it all, while Makoto braced herself to perform this task. These are really lovely cups, so elegant, Mikomi said after a moment, looking at the older woman curiously. May I ask why exactly you sent it to me? Mom didn't explain, just that I should come here immediately. Ah, yes, the reason I called you here, Makoto said, with a prolonged pause. Before that, however, perhaps you could tell me what you think of Uzumaki Naruto. Oh, him? The girl said, her tone suddenly interested. Well, he's strong for a non-Uchiha obviously, and rumor has it he's very loyal. Oko, Makoto said with a small grin, knowing that loyalty was a strong selling point even among the females of the clan. Several girls have developed a crush on him, well Mikomi paused, blushing slightly. Don't feel guilty, that is actually a good thing, Makoto said, sighing, as she set her teacup down. The clan has decided we would like to bring the Uzumaki into the fold. He has a unique condition that could prove useful if mixed with our own, and, as such, we are searching for the proper girl for this task. Task? Proper girl? Mikomi echoed, then looked shocked. You wish to arrange a marriage between him and myself? Well, not, as such, seeing as he has no clan to deal with. Makoto clarified, noting the girl's sudden relief. All we require at the moment is that you seek to develop a relationship with him. Of course, there are now other girls from the various clans that will be vying for his attention, though from what we can tell you only need to concern yourself with the Yamanaka girl. I see, Mikomi murmured, sounding unsure, and looking at the cup of tea gulped audibly. What if I refuse? I mean, not that he couldn't be interesting to date, but well, I don't like being used as an object. I'm a human being after all, it should be my decision. I agree, the Uchiha matriarch said seriously. If it were my decision I would of course leave it to you. However, it is not my decision. I have been ordered to find a suitable girl for this task. Therefore I must order you to begin this task, however I can give you time to consider the task. So if I decide to say no, I don't have to do it? I believe that is what I said, Makoto said, raising an eyebrow. However, why should you say no? Do you distrust the wisdom of our elders? Or my husband? No, of course not. Perhaps you doubt my judgment? That's not it. Mikomi said, waving her hands before her. It's just that, being ordered to do this makes me feel like an animal. I'm a human being, my own person. It's hard to accept this, Makoto-sama. That's all, if I could have time to think, a day. Very well, Makoto allowed, nodding slightly. You have until tomorrow to make your decision. If yes, then you apply yourself with all of your cunning. If no, then we will see what happens. Hi. Noga followed Hyan along the corridor, feeling confident despite his gloved hand. The air was cool, almost damp, and it reminded him of the rains. It had been a week since Hattori had called him to the capital, and after numerous cancelled meetings, Noga was finally going to speak with his brother. Turning his mind away from such thoughts, he mused about his mother's mysterious disappearance. She had been so pleased with his initiative and with how nicely he had handled all the small details that had come up. Her disappearance yesterday had thrown him into disarray, but he hadn't had time to send searchers out. They turned another corner and, unexpectedly, Hyan opened an iron-bound, reinforced door and led the way up to the inner room. Noting the samurai and ninja, Noga felt slightly nervous but marked it off as nothing more than nerves. Crossing the inner room quietly, he braced himself as Hyan opened the last door and ushered him inside. The room was exactly as he remembered it. Dotting the walls were wall hangings depicting the standard half-crescent green and black symbol of the Kusa daimyo. At the far end of the office sat an ancient wooden desk, and behind it rested a massive chair that was more like a throne than anything else. Eyes sweeping the room, he found his brother standing before a rack of scrolls, hands clasped behind his back. Noga smirked to himself. His brother had always been interested in reading and learning. Moving, as if to join the man, he froze as Hattori spoke. Ah, Noga Nyasan. It's a pleasure to see you. I'm so sorry to have kept you waiting. Regent-sama, Noga said carefully, aware of the danger he was now in. His brother was never that polite, unless he was angry, and when Hitori got angry he became as treacherous as a cobra. "Oh, no need for formalities," Hitori said, smiling fondly as he turned to face Noga. "After all, we are brothers, correct?" "Yes, of course," Noga agreed, watching the man like a hawk. "Ah, where are my manners?" Hitori said pleasantly, ringing a small bell. A moment later an unnoticeable inner door on the left opened, allowing a young woman to enter. Noga did a double take. She was very attractive, with long brown hair and blue eyes. Her lips were highlighted seductively with red, and she wore, of all things, a kimono that was far too small and revealed a fading cloud anbu tattoo on the visible part of her breast. "Ah, Sazu-chan. Noga-san, this my lady, Suzuko," Hitori said conversationally as the woman slinked into the room, carrying a tray of tea. "Sazu-chan, this is Noga-san, who has helped me immeasurably." "Hello," Suzuko said in a rather shy fashion as she began pouring the tea for them. Finished, she flashed Noga a flirtatious smile and then, turning, slipped out of the room. Noga stared after her as if hypnotized and then, snapping out of it, focused once more on Hitori. The regent smiled and politely offered Noga the first cup of tea, which was the proper thing to do. Noga wisely declined, then watched with rapt attention as Hitori drank. Seeing no treachery there, the ninja carefully collected the second cup and took a sip. "So, maybe you are wondering why I brought you in today," Hitori said after a moment before moving around his desk to sit down and place his fingers together on the surface. "Well, it would be a very wise thing to wonder." "I trust you," Noga said, preparing for the treachery in store. "Oh, I have no doubt about that," Hitori agreed lightly, smiling. "Yes, I too trust you. For instance, I trust that you were not manipulated into wasting my carefully laid plans. I trust that you understand just how dangerous it is in these times, which also means I trust you understand why I've placed your revered mother under my personal protection." Noga stiffened, staring at his brother calculatingly. "Where is she?" "Safely tucked away in one of my private homes," Hitori said, nodding. "After all, if our father, the daimyo, could be betrayed by his own ninja. I thought the rain." "Oh, didn't you hear? The rain was aided by Kusa Saosui, who, of course, has now been executed," Hitori said seriously, eyes darkening. "Betrayal must receive its just reward, after all, and soon, Rain will know the price for this unprovoked assassination of our father." "Hitori," Noga said slowly, wondering at this act. "You do know that I acted in the best interests of our country," Hitori said curtly. "Oh yes, I know all about you rushing my plans. I understand very clearly, brother, why you decided to act when you acted. However, it is easily handled and, in the end, we achieved the same results." "Of course," Noga said uneasily. "Now, onto why I wanted to see you today," Hitori said, producing a scroll. "This is an order, one that you must bear to Kusa, appointing a new Saosui, and new procedures I have in mind to ensure another such betrayal will never occur." Noga nodded silently, thankful for being allowed to live, then took the scroll. Hitori smiled politely and then produced another scroll. "This scroll contains your new assignment. You'll be going west to a hidden base where I have a new force gathering. Once there, you'll receive further orders." "Anything else?" Noga asked as he took the second scroll and rose. "Just one more thing," Hitori said without standing or allowing his pleasant attitude to slip. "If you ever act as you did in such a way as you have previously, please keep in mind there are far worse things than death." "Hi," Noga agreed, bowing slightly, and then, turning, hurried from the room, aware of just how close he had come to being murdered. Looking up from his paperwork, Uchiha Teka paused, a slight frown forming. Glancing at the clock, he looked back around, suddenly aware of just how late and alone he was. It felt, almost, as if something ominous was coming toward him, and he truly did not like the feeling. It was probably just paranoia. Ever since the Unity mess, all the Uchiha on the military police had been feeling it. They had made up the bulk of the force after all, and now, sadly, most had been killed in the fighting. Those that hadn't had been wounded badly enough to merit treatment and medical leave. Shaking it off, Teka leaned back in his chair and sighed, rubbing his eyes tiredly. Maybe he should call it a night and go home, but that would leave Anabi and Yoshiro alone. There had to be at least 3 police on duty at all times, especially now with things stretched so thin. A sudden noise made him jerk upright, his nerves warning him of danger. Frowning, he eased his way around his desk and stopped in the middle of the floor. waiting, ready for whatever it was that was threatening him. A second later he heard the noise again, and this time realized it was footsteps. An even gait, someone in their late teens from the rhythm. Turning to the open doorway, he raised an eyebrow, watching the shadowy figure approach. The occasional glint of light off the armor told him it was an Anbu. When the figure reached the doorway, Tekka let out a breath, realizing that it was just Itachi. Normally Tekka found the boy unnerving, but now he felt relieved. It had just been his paranoia. "Itachi-san, what brings you by?" Tekka asked, striding toward the younger man. "I came to see who was here," Itachi said blithely, bringing Tekka to a stop. Now that he was closer, he could see blood flecking the boy's cheek and armor. Alarm bells went off in the older Uchiha's head, and he silently prepared for a fight. Itachi seemed completely unbothered by this prospect, instead turning away ever so slightly. "Looks like you had a hard mission." "It was a test," Itachi said without emotion, "to judge my capacity. How about we go talk with Inabi or Yashiro?" "They've already misjudged their capacity," Itachi responded, prompting Tekka to charge, shuriken and kunai flying at his enemy. Itachi dodged the hail of weapons easily, then casually lifted an arm to allow the last one to ricochet off his forearm protector. Tekka, however, took advantage of the distraction and closed the gap between them, a round kick whistling through the air. Itachi ducked, followed by a leg sweep, but Tekka somersaulted away, only to receive a kick to the stomach. Stumbling back, winded, the military police officer dodged a kick to his face only to receive one to the ribs. Moving with the force of the blow, Tekka threw a hook punch, only to have his arm caught, followed by being thrown onto the top of a nearby desk. There was a loud crack as the desk gave under the weight, but Tekka was already scrambling to his feet, only to receive a kick to the back which sent him slamming into the side of another desk. Spinning quickly, Tekka prepared to launch his own assault, only to discover Itachi lunging for his chest with his sword. Grasping a kunai, Tekka parried the stab and fired a straight punch at the Anbu captain's face, only to have Itachi neatly avoid it with a spin, which brought him around to Tekka's now exposed back. A second later, Tekka felt the sharp pain of a blade piercing his chest from behind. Looking down in disbelief, his Sharingan faded, and he clutched at the bloody metal. A gurgle later, he slumped to the ground dead in a pool of blood. The last sound he heard was that of a cage Bunshin disappearing. Uchiha Itachi stood motionlessly in the street, staring at the wall and gate that separates the Uchiha district from the rest of Konoha. It had been one of the few demands they had made during the unification of Konoha. A separate district, with seals to ensure their privacy. Brilliant in its concept, and now about to turn horribly against them. Watching the two black flags that sported the red and white Uchiha fan symbol flutter over the gate in the early evening breeze, Itachi felt the 24 cage Bunshin he had sent out dissipating. It took him a moment to sort through the information, so many faces and other minor details, but it was now confirmed. The last Uchiha within the village, besides his brother who was training, were all gathered within this district. Satisfied, he quietly passed through the gate and stopped long enough to ease it shut. The streets beyond were nearly deserted. He could see the odd person out running a few last-minute errands. For the most part, however, it struck Itachi at just how lazy they had all become. Spotting the Uchiha Senbei, he decided that would be as good a place as any to start. Moving silently, he approached the food store, eyes darting from his portly middle-aged aunt named Uchiha Yoruchi to his smiling uncle Teaki, who was busy reading a paper. The picture is of a perfect middle-aged couple. They were his godparents, and they adored him, and Sasuke. He could remember them being so proud of him when he had graduated, bragged, and given him free food. They were two of the kindest people he had ever met. That made them the most likely targets at the moment, and he felt a shot of adrenaline course through him. "Oh, it's Itachi-kun," Teaki said, looking up from his paper, his smile growing. "What brings you by today?" "Maybe he wanted to see us, dear," Yoruchi said, her kind face filled with a loving smile. Itachi paused, staring at both, and it was Teaki that realized something was wrong. The old man had been a strong ninja in his day after all. He had even formed a single seal by the time Itachi reacted. There was a spray of blood as Itachi drew his sword and plunged it through the man's chest. Then, before Yoruchi's scream could gain pitch, she too died, the sword now separating her head from her shoulders. Pausing, Itachi briefly tried to evolve his eyes, but found them still stunted. Frowning, he sought out more of his relatives, then snapped out of his search as he felt someone trying to kick him. Itachi twisted, effortlessly blocking and throwing two of his own punches. The Uchiha in question ducked one, blocked the other only to have Itachi kick him in the face. Spinning quickly from the momentum, the sword whistled around to slice the man in half. Coming to a stop, Itachi hurled his free hand up and out, killing another Uchiha, making a break for it with a kunai. There was a beat, then Itachi was moving again, as more Uchiha poured out into the street to face him. Blade slashing downward, Itachi cut off one's hand at the elbow. Then twirling the blade he gutted another, and in the same motion, slit another's throat. Sheathing the sword smoothly, Itachi ducked a punch, twisted aside from a kick, and then grabbed the wrist of a punch aimed for his stomach. A second later, the Anbu captain slammed home a kunai to his attacker's throat, causing the man to gurgle before he collapsed. Itachi, however, did not remain standing still. He was already on the move, a kunai cutting down one attacking family member after another. The jutsu were not far behind, and in the sheer chaos of the battle, Itachi felt mounting frustration as each attempt at evolving his Sharingan was met with failure. Still, Uchiha Itachi would not stop until he had the Mankuryu Sharingan. The training field was quiet, save for the soft rustle of the grass amid the breeze. Overhead, the cloud-spotted sky was a mixture of light and dark blues, signaling the onset of twilight. It would be a perfect night for romance or for animals to roam. At least until, with a roar, Uzumaki Naruto darted across the training field with a ball of concentrated chakra between his hands. A moment later, the ball smashed into the targeted tree, followed by the soft sound of grinding wood. Then, with a backlash of chakra, Naruto was sent tumbling backwards end over end. Coming to a rest, the blonde remained in a heap, breathing heavily. Sweat was beading on the sides of his face, but he was more interested in the swirl he had created. "Damn it," Naruto muttered, pushing himself painfully to his feet, his right hand trembling. He didn't understand why he couldn't get this final step, no matter how hard he tried. Non-stop effort had so far yielded nothing. After all of that training, and now this, he still couldn't maintain that damn ball. As a matter of fact, the only thing he had managed to get in the last few days was his revenge for his team not telling him about his promotion to Chunin. Naruto couldn't help but grin as he remembered that dyeing all of Ino's clothes orange along with replacing everything she owned with identical orange items had been tricky, but well worth the effort. As had dyed Shino's hair orange while he slept, which was no easy feat with all those bugs of his. The only prank he could say wasn't worth the effort was the one he had pulled on Anko. She had deserved it more than the others. Anko should have been, above anyone else, the one to tell him. With this in mind, he had come up with a very special prank for her. He had wrapped a large gauge wire around the prong of her TV's power cord so that when she plugged it in she received a shock. Sadly, Anko had become livid after that and was now actively seeking to slit his throat. He briefly concentrated on his surroundings to ensure that Anko wasn't sneaking up on him, then, holding his left hand out, began creating another Rasengan. Hand trembling from the concentration of chakra, Naruto gritted his teeth and, using both hands to maintain the shape, shot forward once more. At the last moment before impact, Naruto released one of his hands and drove it forward. His arm jarred from the impact, but he still pushed, rewarded, as the Rasengan began to bite deep into the wood. Then, with a flash of chakra, it exploded, leaving a deeper spiral in the bark, and Naruto fell on his back. Breathing heavily, he couldn't help but wince as he stared up at the darkening sky. Kami, why couldn't he get this? Studying the crescent moon and listening to the faint noise of the village, Naruto drifted for a moment. Closing his open hands, he sighed, concentrating on the noise from the village. He could still remember the feeling of joy that had flooded through him when he had discovered shop owners and normal villagers acknowledging him. Not as something to reject or to yell at, but as something to praise. He was more aware of the girls, some his age, some younger, all staring at him as if he was Sasuke. He was careful, however, to remember that they only liked him now because of his status, but he still played up to them. But he couldn't forget the feeling he was respected now. Not just by a few people, but by an entire village. That moment had been like something out of a dream that had turned sour quickly as he realized that many of the villagers saw him as more than a hero. Some had said his name in religious awe, as if he was the great reincarnation of the Yondaime. He had been crowded, but he had quickly escaped, overwhelmed and frightened. That hadn't been respected. Those villagers had been worshipping him. They had latched onto him in some insane view that he was something from heaven. That had been the last thing he had ever wanted, and, no matter what, he was determined never to let those types of people near him again. With a grunt, Naruto rolled himself over and then pushed himself back to his feet. Legs trembling, he panted and looked at the tree he had been practicing on. It was identical to so many others, each bearing the swirling pattern of an uncontrolled Rasengan. He felt anger building within him. Holding his hand out once more, Naruto began concentrating chakra and striking at it to form the sphere of power. He let it build, almost to the point that he couldn't stand it, and then, grasping it with both hands, roared, darting forward. Driving his right hand forward, he released the ball from his left and slammed the ball of chakra into the tree. Pushing, straining, he drove it deep into the tree trunk. A moment later, chips of bark striking his cheeks, with a loud cracking noise, Naruto tumbled forward as the tree exploded. Falling face first to the ground, Naruto winced from the pain in his arm even as he felt slivers of wood rain down on him. Using his left arm, the one that didn't feel like jello, he pushed himself over to stare at the tree. He couldn't help but start laughing at what he found. There was only half a tree left, the bottom half. The rest of it had been destroyed. Fuck yeah, Naruto muttered excitedly and then closed his eyes, mind, and body giving out. Sasuke felt his body protest as he moved, but he didn't have the luxury of waiting. He had been training for nearly a full month, non-stop. Despite his determination, even he knew that, when you received word from the Hokage's office that you were ordered to return home to resume missions, you did so. Still, he had stayed as late as he dared, squeezing in a few more hours of training. As a result, his mind was exhausted, and he was pretty sure his chakra was dangerously low. Plus, the mysterious mark on his neck which he had received in the second exam and had been instantly sealed by his clan during the month-long training period was twinging slightly. Still, he felt that he had improved. Not enough to beat Itachi, but definitely enough to beat Naruto. Entering the village proper, he felt the expected hostile gazes from the few that noticed him. Like a true Uchiha, however, he ignored them. Seeing a pink curtain briefly reminded him of Sakura, and he wondered, vaguely, if he should apologize. He felt a flare of annoyance, but tempered it with the knowledge that she did have some right to one. As Kunoichi went, she was excellent, and while there might have been prettier girls he could date, she alone was truly devoted to him. To an Uchiha, devotion and loyalty were prized above almost everything else. Putting such petty musings aside, he spotted the entrance to his family's district, then paused as the wind shifted, carrying the familiar scent of blood toward him. Stomach twisting, Sasuke broke into a run before skidding to a stop, staring in mute horror at the scene before him. The street was littered with dead bodies, twisted into unnatural shapes, and surrounded by pools of blood. Horror and hate consuming him, his eyes swirled into the distinctive Sharingan. Eyes darting from shadow to shadow for signs of the attackers, he discovered more bodies. Children and women, people who could have never developed or passed along the Sharingan. Even pets. Sasuke felt himself wretched as he realized the implications of this moment, all these bodies, and no sound of combat. Kami, the silencing seals that surrounded the district had kept the Anbu, or other ninja, from noticing the massacre. He reeled at the knowledge, but he could think of no one who could do this. He stumbled away from the entrance, knowing he needed to alert someone. Anyone. Whoever, whatever, could wipe out his entire clan had to be dangerous beyond words. Eyes widening, a new fear clutched at his throat and heart, and he darted into the district, heedless of the danger. Rounding one corner after another, barreling down yet another street filled with bodies. Each passing moment drove him faster, making him more frantic. His dad, his mom, Itachi, they could all be dead, and it spurred him to move even faster. 3 streets later, the sealed bite on his neck sending sharp pains through him, Sasuke came to a halt before his home. Throwing open the wooden doors, he shot through the garden, jumping the reflection lake, and slammed the wooden doors to the entrance room of his home. Panting, Sasuke darted across the room and tore through the rice paper doors. Running blindly along the inner veranda, he knew he couldn't stop, couldn't slow down, as long as his family was in danger. Seeing his parents' room come into view, he redoubled his speed. Mother? Father? Sasuke, don't come in, his mother shouted, which only spurred the boy faster, before he slid to a halt and slammed the door open. Sasuke's Sharingan memorized every inch of that moment, from his mother's and father's faces, to the blood, to how they looked like broken dolls. Even the hint of his father's despair and his mother's fear. Part of Sasuke shattered at that moment, even as the image was forever engraved in his memory. Then he saw Itachi standing over their bodies, gazing down at them blankly, a bloody sword in hand. Sasuke, feeling more numb than should have been possible, hesitantly stepped into the room. "What did you do?" At his words, Itachi looked up, and Sharingan activated. Sasuke just barely saw the shuriken, just barely managed to avoid the attack. "Foolish little brother," Itachi breathed, eyes closing. Sasuke shifted his weight, wondering almost hopefully if Itachi was calling him a fool for assuming he could do this to their parents. A moment later, Itachi's eyes snapped open to reveal a Sharingan with a black swirl in the shape of a three-sided throwing star. The Manjikyu Sharingan, Sasuke realized dimly before his mind shattered. "Yes!" Sasuke shouted, clutching at his head, his own Sharingan crumbling as memories danced before him. "As I expected, you are my child," his father said, before the image of Itachi slaughtering him flashed before there was his mother's smiling face. "Your father, when he talks to me, it is only about you." Then she too was slaughtered in a spray of blood before a set of eyes without remorse. "We are unique brothers," Itachi was saying before his others' memories intruded, each relaying the brutal death of his entire clan. One by one, Sasuke witnessed and experienced the pain of his clan's death. Moment by moment, his mind was brutally raped and assaulted by his brother's genjutsu. Until, at last, the torture came to an end, leaving him on the ground, crying and sobbing, a broken and ruined wreck of an Uchiha. "Why?" Sasuke moaned, curling into a ball. "To test my capacity," Itachi said emotionlessly, and because he betrayed the true Uchiha purpose. To test Sasuke repeatedly, even as anger blossomed inside him. "You killed everyone to test. It was essential." "Damn you," Sasuke shouted, lunging up and forward, attempting to mold the chakra for a Chidori. Instead, his body was cracked by crippling pain, and he collapsed to the floor inches from the blood of his parents. Clutching at his neck, withering in agony, he stared hatefully up at the monster that was his brother. "This is as far as you can go," Itachi said indifferently. "As you are, you can gain nothing. Without hate, you are forever stunted. Foolish brother, know that the only reason you remain is because of your wish to surpass me. For that, I will let you live. I hate you," Sasuke managed in a strangled hiss. At the main temple of the Nakano Shrine, on the far right side, under the 7th tatami mat is the clan's secret meeting place, Itachi said, his compassionless eyes never leaving him. "You'll find what purpose the Dojutsu of the Uchiha clan originally served. Hate me, and survive awaken with the same eye as mine to prove your loyalty." Sasuke forced his body to move despite the blinding pain, his anger and hate were great enough to overcome it. Grasping his brother's ankle, Sasuke looked up, wincing, to find Itachi staring down at him unmoved. Sasuke struggled to pull himself up, but Itachi allowed his Manjikyu Sharingan to slam into his mind once more. For the next 24 hours, Itachi's voice and tone, as the memory of Itachi slaughtering their parents filled his mind, "You will relive this night." Uchiha Sasuke screamed like the damned soul he was. Itachi felt his pursuers closing in, gaining ground steadily. He wasn't surprised, really. After all, you couldn't expect to kill an entire clan of combat experts within the heart of the strongest hidden village and not have pursuers. The only thing that surprised him was just how long they had taken in responding to the disturbance. Those silencing seals of his clans had truly been powerful. A minute later, he felt 3 of the signatures pull ahead of the others and close in. It didn't take long for 2 to reach his sides, forming a triangle. Standard formation. Anbu, then. This might prove more trying than he had originally expected, if they weren't trainees, at least. But they would be, since trainees were regularly put into patrols within the walls of Konoha, especially now. The one on his left broke cover first, a sword drawn. Itachi caught the arm, broke it in 3 places, and then shoved the sword through the man's chest, all without breaking stride. "Bastard," the one on the right shouted, and Itachi launched a kunai, barely glancing, but knowing his aim was true. The sound of a body falling to the ground from a high distance reaffirmed this. A minute later, he registered the high-speed travel of a Shunshin and moved to the right, avoiding the attack. The last trainee rebounded with a curse and came back at him, throwing shuriken. He was keeping his distance, however not entirely a bad plan, in Itachi's estimation. Locking eyes with the man, Itachi activated his Manjikyu Sharingan and, with a hoarse cry, the man was consumed in black flames. Itachi, however, was not so distracted that he didn't feel a new group of attackers coming at him from ahead. Word was spreading, apparently. A Shunshin of his own brought him in range of his new enemies, a duck allowed him to avoid a stab, and then a quick flick drove a kunai through the man's throat. The second attacker was taken care of by a standard fire jutsu, and the final one died by a chidori to the face. Body dropping, he continued onward. The Manjikyu Sharingan was beyond his wildest dreams. He could tell what someone was going to do 20 moves before they had finished the first move. His genjutsu was stronger, his fire hotter. Reflecting back on all he had to endure to achieve it, he wondered at the price. He had slaughtered nearly his whole clan, ripped his own soul out, just for this power. A price he would gladly pay again, if he needed, was pulled from his reflection by the feeling of something wet on his cheek. Reaching up, he felt the liquid, then checked it under the moonlight. Black. He realized he was crying blood. Apparently the Manjikyu had another price to pay besides the sacrifice of the thing you care for the most. Still, it didn't change the fact that if he had to pay the price with even more lives, he would. Konoha was in chaos. Carefully controlled chaos, but still chaos. Rumors were flooding the streets. Ninja were jumping at the slightest provocation. Still, the truth, at least within Konoha, was known. Not a full 24 hours ago, the entire Uchiha clan had been slaughtered. Inside their own clan district. Much of Konoha's infrastructure had been made up of Uchiha. The military police were the best known example of this, but there were other positions, such as the Shinobi Hiroku Taichu, who did roughly the same job as the Anbu commander, except he did so for the regular ninja forces, from Genin to Jnin. Then, there was the Jnin Shirei, the chief commander for all regular and special Jnin, who also acted as a second-in-command and advisor to the Shinobi Hiroku Taichu. Thankfully, not all of the infrastructure was dependent on Uchiha. The Haikage held even more positions and were already stepping in to help fill such key points. Unfortunately, this did nothing to help the village's morale or the panic that was seizing it. The military police were beyond hope. After the Unity incident, the majority of the remaining force had been Uchiha. The Anbu were little better, in all honesty. They were stretched thin due to the same incident, and early reports indicated that even more were lost due to the Uchiha incident. This was the state of affairs that Kakashi had been thrust into, so, needless to say, when Kakashi entered the council meeting room, he was beyond pissed. He was bordering on sociopathic, and when he strode into the room, he did so like an Oni straight from hell. His gaze promised pain to any who so much as spoke before he was ready. He slowly circled the room and the round table. His eye roamed over each and every one in silent calculation before finally stopping at the seat traditionally used by the Hokage. Glancing briefly at both Homura and Kaharu, he focused entirely on his acting successor, Tenzu, while placing his hands on his back as he spoke. "Well?" One of the council members started to say before Kakashi fixed him with a withering glare. Seeing the man choke his words, the acting Hokage fixed his steady gaze back on Tenzu. "All I want is to know A, who, B, how, C, our status, and D, survivors." Tenzu shifted slightly and then spoke, his voice carefully neutral so as to hide his own unease at Kakashi's attitude. "From all accounts, the who would be Uchiha Itachi. He's managed to escape the village, but we've given orders to the patrols ordering his neutralization. As for how, we don't know. Evidence suggests that he began killing members of his clan for at least the last 6 months starting with Shisui. We do know that he managed this massacre partially due to the silencing and chakra concealing seals that were applied for the privacy of the Uchiha clan district. I knew their paranoia would hurt us," one of the council members muttered, then, seeing Kakashi's glare, apologized. "So," Kakashi said after a moment, looking once more at Tenzu, "we had an unstable sociopath working within our own walls, planning to kill his entire clan for nearly 6 months?" Apparently, Tenzu admitted before continuing with his report. "As for our current status, we've managed to contain the situation. Nobody in, nobody out, a total communications lockdown, as well. As I said before, we sent encoded orders to our patrols in the field relaying that all standing orders are to remain in place and that Uchiha Itachi is to be neutralized." "Good. At least now we don't have to worry about someone getting any funny ideas," Kakashi muttered, crossing his arms. If word of this got out, in their current disorder, every other Kage power would attack and Konoha would crumble. They needed to get a handle on the situation and repair their infrastructure as best they could, as fast as they could. As for survivors, Tenzu continued and Kakashi focused on him once more. There is only one confirmed survivor. Uchiha Sasuke. We're not sure why he survived either. From what we could tell, he attempted to fight against Itachi, exhausted himself, and is trapped in a very intense genjutsu. Genjutsu was always Itachi's specialty, Kakashi muttered, looking out the window over the vast village, unable to believe the situation they were now dealing with. It was like Orochimaru's betrayal all over again, only this time nobody had suspected a thing. What is the current status of Uchiha Sasuke? Homura asked, his voice firm and determined. Konoha Hospital, ICU. Anbu Guard Level 2. Last report indicated that he was still trapped in the Genjutsu, Tenzu explained, tapping his finger against the table. I've got both the top Anbu Genjutsu expert and the top Nin Genjutsu expert working on breaking it, but they both say they've never encountered this type of technique. A Genjutsu shouldn't be that hard to break, Kakashi said, frowning behind his mask. The two top Genjutsu experts in the village, and they were utterly helpless? Send for Inoichi-san. He should be able to break it, if they're still unable to. If they do manage to break it, before he gets there, I want Inoichi-san standing by to help Ibiki-san with questioning, since Sasuke is the only one who can give us a clear picture of what exactly happened. Of course. Kakashi nodded absently at the acknowledgement and then left the room. Let the council discuss the situation even further. It was all they were good for, in Kakashi's opinion. It would be up to him to protect the village as best he could, at least until Tsunade turned up to take over the job. First things first, he would have to visit Sandaime and keep the man up to date. After that, he would have to deal with the others and probably send word to the Inuzuka clan for their help in tracking Itachi. The burial of the bodies was also going to fall to him. He couldn't trust any of the clans to handle that. Especially the Haika, who now had a frightening amount of control of Konoha, which meant he would have to make sure to break it as soon as he could. Above all of that, however, was his desire to know why, exactly, Itachi had waited for so long. Itachi had waited longer than anyone he had ever heard of, just to strike. Why now? Why kill his family? For that matter, why wipe out the entire clan and then leave Sasuke alive? Admittedly, Sasuke was strong, but he was nowhere near a real threat to Itachi. Leaving him alive was an act of compassion, which Itachi never showed when he was killed. More importantly, it was also an act of foolishness. Sasuke would get stronger. He would be driven by a thirst for vengeance that would never be quelled until Itachi was dead. Kakashi would have to keep a close eye on the boy, maybe offer training to try and keep the boy from going too far into the darkness that was going to consume him. Still, there was a paranoid part of him, the cynical part, that told him it could all be an act. Sasuke could have been an active participant in the slaughter and had decided to remain behind to act innocent. However, Itachi did not tolerate such acts of dubious loyalty and, if it had been true, would have killed Sasuke immediately. Instead, he decided that either Itachi had simply not considered the act of killing Sasuke worthwhile or Sasuke had faced Itachi after he had achieved whatever goal he sought in killing his clan. Both rang true in his mind, and Kakashi silently mused that they were probably interconnected, that, for whatever reason, Sasuke had survived only through sheer luck. Yet, this meant that the Uchiha had been hiding a very large, very dangerous secret. It appeared that the only way to discover it would be to talk to an Uchiha. Which meant he would be speaking with Sasuke sooner than he had imagined. It had been a long time since Sakura had spent the night at Ino's, a long time since they had stayed up late into the night talking. Things were still a bit rough, a bit strained, but they had made progress. Sakura and Ino could honestly say they were friends. Not as close as they once were, but they were working on it. The main theme last night, and most of the morning, had actually been Ino venting on Naruto's prank. Sakura honestly wondered how, exactly, he had managed to pull it off, while at the same time pitying Ino. Having a boyfriend who could do that to you was not an easy thing to live with. Still, Sakura had used every chance to tease the girl, especially about the orange comforter Ino claimed had just been overlooked but had still slept under. Of course, all of that had happened before she was racing through the streets in a panic. 10 minutes ago I had seen the fracturing of her facade of strength and the near shattering of her world. An Anbu had arrived in the shop where both girls were giggling and working on flower arrangements and demanded to see Inoichi. Of course, the older man hadn't been there, but Ino's mom had. Ino's mom, who had asked what exactly happened, said that they needed Inoichi. 10 minutes ago, for the first time, Haruno Sakura heard about the Uchiha massacre. 10 minutes ago, Haruno Sakura had shoved out of her way and bolted from the shop. 10 minutes ago, she had started crying as she ran, headed for the hospital. Because 10 minutes ago, she stopped being a kunoichi and became a 13-year-old girl whose world had suddenly shattered. Sasuke was strong, Kiba said it made him arrogant, but Sakura denied that. Sasuke was many things: confident, brave, fearless, her knight, and savior, but he was not arrogant. He also happened to be the cornerstone of her world. Her inner self depended on his strength, on the fact that he would always be there for her. Without him, if he was gone, or in serious danger, her world crumbled. Sakura, of course, knew that made her weak in the long run, and she tried not to depend on it. She couldn't help it, though. Her father had destroyed a lot of her strength and confidence. It hadn't been until Ino that she had found her confidence again. Her strength, however, was still lacking, and without Sasuke she would never be able to recover it. Shoving her way through a pair of ninja, Sakura quickened her pace, heart hammering in her ears. Sasuke? He was the only thing in her mind, hovering just before her mind's eye on his deathbed. She had to reach him. She wasn't sure what she could do, but she knew she had to be there for him. This time, she forced her way through a knot of shopkeepers and, without a word of apology, kept running. With each step, her fear grew, and her heart felt like it was about to explode. Dimly, she was aware that she wasn't breathing. As she ran, there was a burning sensation in her lungs. Her eyes burned, as well, from unshed tears and the wind of her passage. Still, she ran, heedless of the pain, of the fear, because she had to get to Sasuke. Nothing was going to stop her. Nothing? Sasuke? Her legs churned relentlessly as she skidded around each corner, shoved people out of her way, and raced to the building. As the massive building and its gates came into view, Sakura gasped for air but didn't stop running till she burst through the admitting doors. Skidding to a halt on the marble floor, she felt her head spin. Stupid, stupid. Sakura forced herself to breathe, to recover, and then fear about Sasuke's life emboldened her. Rushing to the admitting desk, elbowing her way through a pair of doctors, Sakura squared her shoulders and glared at the nurse sitting behind the desk. Sasuke-kun. Where is Sasuke-kun? Ma'am, you need to. Where is he? Sakura screeched, knowing without looking that everyone was staring at her. Listen, girl, you can't just come in here. Tell me where he is. Sakura shouted, uncaring about manners. All that mattered was reaching Sasuke. I'm going to have to ask you to, the nurse started to say before a new, though familiar, voice spoke up in a panic. Sakura. Kurenai-sensei? Whipping her head around, Sakura found Kurenai walking toward her, lips forced into a thin line. Behind her, looking equally serious, was a purple-haired woman dressed in solid black. Forgetting about the nurse, Sakura rushed toward her sensei, hoping and praying that she could help her see Sasuke. Kurenai-sensei, what's going on? What happened? They said the Uchiha and Sasuke, and. Sakura, SSH. It's okay, the older woman said, pulling her into a comforting hug. Everything's fine. I can't tell you everything. But. Sakura. Kurenai suddenly snapped, shutting her down before she could even start. Listen to me. This is what I can tell you. You can't see him right now, but he's fine. Unconscious, but fine. He suffered from an intense genjutsu. He'll be fine. So, is he okay? Sakura asked, the tension coursing through her body fading. Of course he was. If Kurenai said he was, then things were fine. Genjutsu. Kurenai was a genjutsu expert, so there was no danger. It was okay, everything was okay. Iki-san, Yuzuki-san, we just got word, Inoichi's voice suddenly said, and Sakura looked around to find Ino's dad and the scarred man from the Chunin exams marching toward them. Ah, you're here? The genjutsu. We've never seen anything like it. No matter how hard we tried, we couldn't break through, and then it just suddenly went away, the purple-haired woman said, shaking her head. He's still unconscious. The doctors were checking on him earlier. So, other than the genjutsu, what else happened? Inoichi asked tiredly. Chakra exhaustion, mostly, Kurenai said, letting Sakura pull away from the hug, but keeping her underarm. There was a minor hint of his chakra pathways having been altered, but nothing very serious. Altered? Ibiki asked, his eyes narrowing. I know what it is, Sakura offered, then, seeing all their attention shift to her, she braced herself. Sasuke had told her about the seal, he'd gotten it from his clan for the exams, but had asked her not to mention it to anyone. If it were any other situation, she would, but it seemed to be hurting Sasuke, and she had to tell. Well? It's the after effect of an Uchiha clan seal, Sakura said, using all of her training to keep her voice steady. He got it for entering the Chunin exams. It's a seal that's supposed to help the user access their chakra more effectively. Could explain why the genjutsu was so strong, Kurenai mused softly. If he was using the same seal, or knew about it, he could concentrate the chakra and maybe even make it so that Sasuke's own chakra would support the illusion. Possible, Hibiki allowed, snorting. Those Uchiha were always doing stuff like that with seals. Create a useful seal, then lock it away, keep it secret, and then when it backfires let us deal with the chaos. Just like with their clan district and all their privacy seals. Anyway, Inoichi said, shooting the man a glare before turning to Sakura. Listen, Ino's just outside. Why don't you go with her and get some flowers for Sasuke? I'm sure by the time you get back we'll be done and you can see him. Sakura hesitated, chewing her bottom lip. Her overwhelming desire to see Sasuke was still there, it was urging her to demand to see him. Yet, now that Kurenai was there, exerting forced calm, Sakura knew it wouldn't happen. At least, not until after they were done, and it wasn't like Sasuke was really in danger anymore. Kurenai had said he was fine, she wouldn't let anything happen to Sasuke. He was one of her students, and Kurenai viewed each of them like her own children, to an extent. Which meant Sasuke would be okay, as long as Kurenai was around. Glancing up at her sensei, she received a reassuring look, then she looked back at Inoichi. I'll be back in a bit, Sakura murmured quietly, then, stepping away, walked out of the hospital. Now that she was thinking back on the last few minutes, she realized how rash she had been. Kami, she had shoved Ino, after all that time of rebuilding their friendship, and she had shoved the girl aside like she was nothing. Sakura? Looking up, Sakura found Ino standing in front of her, a look of uncertainty on her face. Hey, was all Sakura could manage. Are you okay? Ino asked, moving up to hug her. Reflexively, Sakura hugged back, then Ino pulled away to study her face. I mean, you rushed out of there so fast, and you were a bit freaked, Sakura supplied, feeling and looking ashamed. I was sorry about that. I mean, I shoved you and just. Hey, no biggie, Ino said, cutting her off with an understanding smile. I mean, you heard about that massacre, Sakura supplied thickly, still unable to really process it. The entire Uchiha clan killed? They were considered the best at combat. If it hadn't been Naruto that had stopped that demon, then it would have been an Uchiha. Right, then you heard Sasuke was in the hospital. 2 and 2 equals 4, so I think it's an understandable reason to freak out, Ino continued softly, putting an arm around Sakura's shoulder. Sakura nodded, feeling grateful that Ino was being so understanding. As they slowly walked down the steps and toward the gates, Ino was saying how in the right circumstance she would react the same. Sakura suddenly went stiff, eyes widening, as a horrible thought rushed to the forefront of her brain, a thought that forced her to stare at Ino. What's wrong? Ino, where's Naruto? Training, the girl muttered, crossing her arms. Hiding too, if he knows what's good for him. Reaching out, Sakura grasped Ino's elbow, her voice carrying an edge to it. Ino, if he was out there, and he learned, or saw, wouldn't he try to stop whoever had killed the Uchiha clan? Ino's eyes went wide, her face paling, and her shoulders sagging. A horrible understanding flashing through her eyes, then Ino quickly mastered herself and put on a front of bravado. Why yeah, but he's faced a demon, right? So, I mean, like, if he did face them he'd live. Sakura agreed quickly, feeling horrible about supplying a thought that had escaped Ino in the panic. Whoever it was, had to be hurt. Sasuke-kun fought him, obviously, and nobody fights Sasuke-kun without getting hurt. Exactly, Ino agreed, forcing herself to sound confident. Besides, I doubt Naruto-kun fought him. The way he trains, he probably fell asleep and missed everything. Of course, it happens to Sasuke-kun all the time, Sakura agreed with a nod. Plus, we don't know where he was training, so we don't know if he would even know at all. Yeah, Ino agreed with a nod. Nothing to worry about. I'm actually sorta sorry he didn't fight the bastards. Then Sasuke could see their heads on a pike for what they did. Exactly. Ino nodded firmly. Tell you what, we see him, we'll ask him to join up with Sasuke so they can both track the bastards down. Sounds like a plan, Sakura said, smiling a bit more. We better go get some flowers for Sasuke-kun, though. He won't like the idea of teaming up with Naruto. Mizo ramen, can't forget that, Ino said walking beside her. Cause Naruto-kun won't be happy about it either. Sakura nodded, deciding that it was nice to have a friend to tell lies with. Thanks for watching my video, leave a like if you enjoyed my video and also do consider subscribing to my channel for more awesome content. If you want the next part of this story, let me know in the comment box. See you next time, till then sayonara.